you just mentioned their name, and it's funny. It has such a silly name, Plinkett, but they were very fierce. They used to come in and take their spears and jam right in his counter. And he told me, you know, take what you want. And till he got to know them, and he got them educated into how the system worked. You know, if they were going to barter or they were going to pay money or whatever. And,
Well, he must have learned to speak that.
yeah,
He did.
Because your mother still can say,
yeah,
what do you want?
Well, I don't know. The only thing I ever learned was something like Octu Sawasako. And I had several definitions, but supposedly that's Plinkett for something that has to do with hello. What do you want to eat?
How did Frank Wehrer meet Lucille Chisholm?
Frank Ware met Lucille Chisholm. He was a soldier over at Fort Seward, and Lucille,
Yeah, in Haines.
yeah, in Haines, and Lucille was running a bakery in Haines, and they got to know each other at the dances that they used to have in town, and both of them were excellent dancers, and so also Frank, he was a horse fancier, and he used to ride horses between Haines and the fort, which was like about a half a mile apart. And so he'd ride over and just happen to see her, and they would talk. And there's pictures in the photo album before they married of Frank riding this handsome buckskin horse, and then the next picture you see Mom riding the buckskin horse and Dad walking behind. And so they both enjoyed going out and picnicking and going to dances, and they were a pretty active couple, and they were well known up in Haines, and well liked. I never seen anybody who disliked Frank and my father. I never saw anybody that didn't like my mother. And we were in a situation where we came back to visit their hometown, really, and so we met all of their friends and people that they knew, and they were very well liked.
Except that, the only, one of the variables in that kind of thing is that Joe Chisel, being a hard-working German, of German stock, did not like soldiers. And since there were very few women in town, beautiful women, eligible women, that when it came time for Frank to be having eyes on Lucille, that he didn't particularly think that was a very good idea. Happy words then passed on, because Joe Chisel thought that Lucille could do much better than hanging around soldiers, and so that and apparently Emily, that his wife, really didn't see any problems with this, but Joe Chisel did, and so there was a certain amount of antagonism with all of this. And being a small town, of course, everybody knew about it, and so that when Lucille and Frank finally got married, they went to Skagway to get married. And it seems to me they got married in 1934 in the winter time, and they talk about going up on the Fornance, and the Fornance was the name of an official government ship that used to come into Chilkoot Barracks and bring in supplies and things, and so that when they had official things that had to be done, you would ride on the Fornance, and the Fornance went to Skagway, and it was one of those typical, very wintry kinds of years in which the ship was covered completely with ice by the time it got to Skagway, and people with axes and shovels are busy chipping all the ice off so that so that everything would function.
What was the date that they got married?
I don't remember.
Oh, Dad.
Come on, here.
I don't know. What was it?
You remember, Joe? Oh,
I'm disappointed in you.
tell us, Mom.
It was December 21st. It was the shortest day of the year, and it was the longest night of the year. You guys. If we heard that once, we heard it.
Okay, all right, December
The
21st.
kids all remember.
Okay.
You're right.
And then they came back to the post.
Well, then when they got up to Skagway, then that night they went to the justice of the peace, and the safe was all frozen shut, so they could not transact any business until the next day. And then after officially getting married, then they came back down to Haines. And the story that we always heard was that all of the people in the army post, Dad was only a enlisted man. I'm not even sure he was a sergeant. He might have been a private. And so everybody in the army post kind of turned out for Frank's wedding. And so they put my mother on a wagon and
Hay bale.
with hay bales on the wagon, and then they proceeded then to drive around the post. This was like December 23rd or so, and miserably cold. And my mother would always say, "There I was in my skirt and my nylons, and here we are on these hay bales as we're driving around the post."
And then they had a big reception at the post.
They had a big reception at the post.
And a dance and all that kind of thing. And so the townspeople and everybody was there. I don't know if Grandpa was there because he made it so that Grandpa or our father, he had to like prove himself, and so Frank was busy proving himself, just like building the house. I think that kind of unified them, because then Grandpa saw that he needed some help, and then they kind of got together, I think, after that, and he thought he was all right. But they had some problems beforehand because Mom had been married before, and Grandpa was protective of her and didn't want her to make the same mistake again.
But they lived up over or something. The stable or
It was,
something?
I thought it was the
Yeah.
fire department.
No, they lived up over the stable, over the blacksmith shop, over at the army post. But they did that primarily because of the squabble between Joe Chisel and Mom and Dad. And so that as a consequence, that this was the best housing that they could find. And so they converted that, and the officers allowed that to be, because normally people didn't live over the blacksmith shop. And remembering hearing Dad say that the miserably cold winter that it was, and that one of the things you do when when you don't have heat going all night long is that usually you let the water run so that it doesn't freeze. Well, as he said, that they had the water running, and the water froze in the drain, the water froze in the sink, and the water kept running. Then it overflowed the sink onto the floor, and the water froze all over the floor, and it was really quite a mess. And because the normal thing was that people didn't leave the heat running all night long, and because it was cold.
Wood heat, right?
No, cold.
the post had coal. A lot of the people in town got
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about your dad? What you
No.
know about it?
No, because I don't know very much about him other than that his last name was Rayburn. He was from Idaho, but none of the documents of any sort indicate anything about anything other than that. And Mom never talked about him very much, like practically nothing. Certainly, as Joe and I grew up, did not know anything about him. And so that supposedly, either by the time I was born or whatever, that he, that he wasn't around. So, so don't, other than those two kinds of things, is that he was from Idaho. Last name was Rayburn.
His first name
Was Robert. No, his first name was Arnold, which is my middle name.
But what did they used to call you when you were little?
Well, I have been told that when I was little, I was called Bunny, and then later on was called Bud. And I was Bud then until I got until I grew up and thought that Bud was not a proper name, so I ended up being,
About the time you went to college.
Oh, I probably got, thought I was pretty smart when I went to college, so that I wasn't Bud anymore, but I was Bob or Robert.
You came home and you said, from now on, I appreciate if you call me Bob.
I think your dad always called you Bud.
Yeah. I think he did. But that's why Mom was running the bakery. When she was married to Rayburn, she was sending him money to go to college. That's the story that Mom was telling us.
But she never said where he was going to college,
I
right?
thought she said Fairbanks. That would be the University of Alaska.
Right.
And, but no, she said that Grandpa went up there. He wasn't going to college. He came back and told her that. So he kept wanting more money and more money and more money all the time. So she divorced Rayburn down in Juneau. She told us that it was pretty kind of a nasty divorce because he was threatening them and so forth down at the dock, yelling and screaming. But I think she did real well out of the whole deal because I think she was trying to be independent there again and run the bakery and so forth and support her family and that. But she'd come through that all right also.
But see, in that regard, is that Lucille, our mom was born in San Diego in 1911, February, no,
November 13th.
November 13th.
That's Debbie's.
No, I
Your
think
mother
it
was
is.
born in the spring.
It is.
No, it is
13th.
November. Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it is the 13th.
Hers the 13th, Debbie's the 19th.
Okay. And yours is January 24th, so.
Right.
But anyway, Mom was born in 1911 in San Diego. Joe and Emily Chisel were down there because in 1911 this was past the gold rush time, and apparently Joe Chisel was having second thoughts about whether to stay in Haines for the rest of his life. But after a while, they apparently came back up to Haines, And one of the things that they decided to do was is have Lucille go to school on the outside, and so they they enrolled her in Holy Name Academy, which was in Seattle, run by the Holy Name Sisters. And Mom went to school there, and as I remember, she enjoyed that very much.
Yes.
And she was in school there until the 11th grade, and then Joe Chisel came through visiting one of the times, that it was a boarding school, and said to Lucille, "I've got to have you in the store. I can't, you know, your mother is not helping me in terms of tending the store. I got too many things to do at the store, and I need help in running the store. So please come and quit school." And so reluctantly she did. And so she came back to Haynes and worked with Grandpa in the store, and Grandma, however that was.
However.
And so it was always kind of a disappointment that she never got a chance to graduate from high school.
Grandpa didn't either.
As far as we know, Grandpa didn't have any kind of a high school education.
They had to burn down the school.
No, that was Frank Wehrer, yeah, but I'm
That's
talking
the
about
one-
Joe Chisel.
Oh, Joe Chisel.
That no, as far as Frank Wehrer was concerned, he was from Patterson. He was born in Hungary, but a good share of his family were living around Patterson, New Jersey, Patterson and Hawthorne, New Jersey, and he used to brag about the fact that he, I think, completed the 6th grade and jumped out the window or did some strange kind of thing, and ran away from home, ran away from school, ran away from whatever it is, and as far as I can tell, never came back to.
He worked in the mills for a while.
Yeah.
Well, apparently he did, right?
He worked
a silk
with,
mill.
Mutts.
Uncle Mutz was the real weaver.
Yeah,
So
this is
he-
silk weaving, yeah.
He let each one of his brothers get a job there too, running the loom. They just walked in, all of a sudden they're running the loom. Well, they didn't know anything about it, but Mutz did. So Mutz would change all the patterns and do everything that was supposed to be done. Like my dad said was, we didn't do anything, just chase the girls around the plant. But Mutz, he did everything that had to be done. But I think we ought to start from Alaska forward.
Okay.
And I think the one thing that happened to us while we were up in Alaska was that World War II broke out, and Dad got orders to go to California for a staging area, and we were going to send troops to the Pacific and a lot of the islands out there, and Philippines and so forth.
Okay, that may be. As I remember it, we left Alaska before World War II. We
Before
were in
Pearl Harbor.
before Pearl Harbor, and because I can remember being on a Sunday morning that we were in California, and I was going to say Fort Ord, California, Seaside, California, when Pearl Harbor happened. That for whatever the reason was, we had left Alaska already, and maybe maybe it had to do with what was going on in Europe, because certainly the war with Hitler and these other things was happening already in �39.
What year did the Second World War start? Is it 1940?
1940, huh?
Or was it
Or 41.
Pearl Harbor was December 7th,
Okay.
Okay. Then we did come down before that.
Yeah.
So I'm saying we were down in California in 1940, and that's so. And we lived in Seaside,
Seaside, California.
and we stayed. Dad stayed with us in Nashville until he went overseas. And remember that was the first time we went to a USO show. We saw Bob Hope at that time putting on the first USO show.
And Jack
in
Benny
person, right?
and Rochester,
Jerry Colonna.
all those kinds of things. And so, but with Pearl Harbor then, they were starting to, that we had to blacken the windows, put blankets up to the windows. Cars had half, the headlights were half painted over the top, that you couldn't have lights on